Okay, so in this section, let's see how we can create a procedural road network. So from this section onwards, actually, we are going to cover pretty much critical concepts on this course, because ideally this course is designed to teach you how you can create a procedural generated road system. And time to time, I will explain certain theoretical concepts and mathematical concepts as well, because we know we need to have that knowledge in order to create a proper procedural road system. Okay, so just for the time being, let's create a new level, and from that level, let's proceed. Okay, so since I have this setup already, maybe what I can do is go to the maps, and I'm gonna simply duplicate this maps code and I'm gonna rename it called map underscore roads. Okay, so let's open up that map. So here you can see now we are on the map roads level, and I'm gonna get rid of these NPC characters and this ramp. I just need a empty level like this. Okay, right now let's create a blueprint to construct our procedural road, and I'm gonna create a new folder called procedural roads, and over there let's create another folder called road, and there I'm going to create a new blueprint class which is an actor called bp underscore road. So basically this blueprint is the master blueprint for all of the roads that we are going to design later on. So we have to encapsulate pretty much solid logic over there within this specific actor. Okay, so I'm going to open up that instance, and here you can see currently we have just a very abstract actor class. Right, so here first we need the spline, right? Because from the spline, along the spline actually we are going to populate our road meshes. Okay, so first let's add a spline. Okay, and here you can see now we have that spline, and if you drag and drop your blueprint to a level, here you can see you can adjust the spline length, and you can add spline points, and you can bend it something like this. You have all the total control over your spline. Okay, so just for the time being, I'm going to remove this one, and let's go to our instance, and over there on construct we have to procedurally generate the content for static meshes along this spline. So for that, first I'm going to create a new function called initialize, and this function should be called at the construction script level. And now let's go to the initialize function. Right, so here here we can actually generate our road, but for that I need to determine which segment that I'm currently in, right? Because based on the spline length, we have to populate multiple static meshes along this spline, right? For that actually I need to determine how many total segments that I have and how many meshes that I'm going to spawn. But for now, just for the time being, let's simply add a for loop, and as the first index I'm gonna keep this one is 0, and as the last index maybe I'll give some random number called 3. Okay. I just want to show you like how the population works at runtime, so I'm gonna give it some sort of a random number like 3. And then whenever we calling this loop, it should generate a static mesh along the spline. So for that, let's create another function, and I'm going to call this one as enroll. And essentially what this function does is it should add a spline component to the spline, and it has to spawn that specific static mesh on that position. All right, so we can do that by simply adding a spline mesh component, and I'm gonna promote this to a local variable called L underscore spline mesh comp, which is stand for spline mesh component. So this is a new component which has been spawned at 0 by 0 by 0 relative transform point with along the spline. Right, and then we have to set the static mesh of this specific spline mesh component. So what I can do is, let's just simply, no, maybe let's create another function so we have the total control over that function later on. So I'm going to create a new function called set spline mesh. Okay, and then maybe, yeah, within this function I need certain inputs. The first one is what's the spline mesh component that I am currently referring. So it should take that as an input, which is the type of spline mesh component, and what sort of a mesh that I'm going to spawn, right? So what's the static mesh that I'm going to spawn along the along that specific spline point. So this should be static mesh, and I can set its collision types as well. Like maybe I can keep the road collision as no collision, or maybe like block all, something like that. So in order to control that, I will pass the collision type through the function as well. And this should be the type of collision enabled, right? So this is a default enumeration provided by the Unreal Engine, so we can simply use that. Right, now let's promote these to local variable, so it will be easy for us later on. No, I think we don't need to populate it. We can simply call by using the function signature name. Right, so let's call the spline mesh component variable, and I'm gonna set the static mesh of that spline mesh component with this static mesh that has been passed via the function. Right, so now there is a small convention issue, like if we have the variables in the same name, actually it will be a bit difficult to find out what's the correct variable is. So I think for the safe side, let's promote all of them into a local variable with our own naming convention, so it'll be easy for us to identify those variables. L spline mesh, and finally L collision type. Right, and then here I'm gonna get rid of this one, and instead let's use L spline mesh component variable, and as the static mesh I'm gonna use the L spline mesh. Okay, then in order to control this collision, I can call the set collision enabled function over here and pass the collision type through that function. Also, I can control the collision response to channel as well. For that, let's go use the set collision response to channel. And here I have to specify what's the channel, right? So currently it is well static, but I think we can maybe give it our own custom channel as well. But let's take a look into those stuff later on, right? But for now, I'm going to keep the response channel of the spline mesh static, spline mesh component static mesh channel as well static, and I'm gonna keep its response as block. So whatever the static mesh that I'm going to spawn through the level should be world static, and it should be blocked by any sort of dynamic actors within the level. Right. After that, we have to attach this spline mesh component to our default scene route. Otherwise, whenever we are moving this BP road actor along the level, those spawned static meshes may not be moved accordingly. Right. So in order to prevent that, we have to keep all the spawned static meshes attached to this specific blueprint actor so that they will go along. So for that, we can use this attach component to component. The target is L spline mesh component and the parent should be default scene root. Okay. Then our add road function, let's call this set spline mesh function. And as the spline mesh component, I'm gonna pass L spline mesh component like this. Oh. So now I can't use that variable. Why was that? So this is the type of spline component object reference. That is the case. Yeah, this shouldn't be the spline component. It should be spline mesh component. I'm gonna remove this one and let's add spline mesh component. Add spline mesh component. Yeah, this one. And I had to change the type of this as well. So let's make it as spline mesh component object reference. And I'm gonna change the variable type. Compile. Now I can attach it properly to here and here. Right. And as the collision type, for now I'm gonna keep it as maybe collision enabled query and physics. And as the static mesh, now we can give some static mesh. So if you have this PRS essentials content pack in your project, if you go to the meshes and modular roads, and under the roads directory, I have two types of roads. We have one-way road and two-way roads. So just for the time being, I'm gonna use this one-way road, and basically it contains all the required meshes that we need later on. But for now, I'm just focusing on using this mesh, which is SM_underscore one-way road. Okay. So this is a very simple mesh that I created using Blender. Basically, it has the pavement and like sort of like a black pavement on the top and sort of solid concrete pavement at the bottom. Okay. So let's use this mesh. And I'm gonna plug this one over here. So if you need to plug this one directly like that I did, you have to first go to the directory and select the static mesh. And after that, you have to click this arrow icon. Otherwise, you can search the asset name from this drop down as well. Okay. Either of them would be fine. Okay. Compile and save. Now our add road function is done. So let's go to the initialize function, and I'm gonna call that add road function over here. Compile and save. Go to the viewport. Now you can see it spawned a mesh like this. Okay. Actually, this is not a single mesh. It has spawned 3 meshes and everything is overlapping with each other because within this for loop I'm calling this function 3 times. Okay. So here also you can see at the level, now you can see the road has been appeared, but as I mentioned before, ideally you should be able to see 3 meshes, but you can't see it because they are overlapping with each other. Right. So in the next part, I will show you how we can fix that spline mesh start and end positions so that you will be able to see those segments has been appeared along the road.